Hi everyone, Ben Taylor here and welcome to today's video. Today's tutorial is going to be showing you how to take dull, uninspiring images and then turning them into professional looking photos. Now this is something that's actually really easy and quick to do. So it's not something you're going to find difficult, and by the end of today's tutorial you're going to be getting some really great results. So you've got to make sure you've got Lightroom today because that's the program that we're going to be doing this on. But as long as you have, then sit back, relax, and let's jump into today's tutorial and get started. So in today's tutorial you're going to get to grips with taking dull photos and then transforming them into something that looks professional and beautiful. Now this is something that I like to call the butterfly effect. Okay, so imagine you've got a caterpillar and that plods along, it's a bit dull looking and no one really takes notice of it, but then one day the caterpillar transforms into a beautiful butterfly that's full of colour and it flies around elegantly and then everyone notices it. Well, this is a bit like your dull photos. So it starts off dull and unimpressive, and then today we're going to transform it in Lightroom into something that's beautiful, colourful and really stands out. So that was probably a really deep way of explaining this, but hopefully it set the scene for what you are going to accomplish by the end of today's tutorial. Okay, so if you enjoy watching videos like this, where you're learning about Photoshop, Lightroom and photography, then I'd love to encourage you to join us here and subscribe to the channel. It's easy to do, just click subscribe on YouTube, and then if you click the notification bell, then you can get notified every single time a new video comes out. Now, let's get the ball rolling today. So, as always, I have the photo which I'm going to use in this tutorial, and it's going to be available for you to join along with. All you've got to do is go onto the description area of YouTube, click on the arrow, and there's going to be some really obvious text which says tutorial picture. You can't really get that wrong, I'm sure. So just click on that and then that will download onto your computer and you'll be able to use it for today's tutorial. Right, let's jump in and get started. Okay, so you should have your image now open in front of you in Lightroom. Remember, if you haven't done this already, just go into the description area in YouTube, click on tutorial picture and that will download, and then you can import that into Lightroom and get started. So this image that we're looking at now on our computers is something that would easily be left or deleted, and you really wouldn't pay much attention to it because it's dull, it's uninspiring and it's definitely ordinary. Now the most important thing to do that when you first start on the process of retouching your image in Lightroom, you want to take a quick step back, look at your image and decide what you want to do with it. Now I used to get an image, put it in Lightroom and just start editing. Now there's nothing worse you can do than to do that, and it's because you don't really have any end goal or result. So you start down a path and you don't have any kind of goal in place to know where you're going to. And that way you end up editing an image and not really knowing what you wanted to do with it. So you never get the best results doing it that way. So I'm going to just look at this image quickly and decide what I want to do with it. So the first thing I can see in this image is that this area down here is very dark and it's nearly impossible to see any detail in the trees and kind of the buildings at the bottom. So that's something that we want to change in the image. We want to push up the values or the brightness in the shadows and the darker areas like the blacks. And this will add some detail into that area of the image. Another thing I'd like to do is I'd like to kind of correct the white balance because I don't believe it's right in this image. I'd also like to push in more colour because you've got some nice colour in the buildings here and this building as well, but you can't really see it very well. So by pushing some more colour into the image, or vibrance, will really make these parts of the image pop and stand out more. And then finally I think I'm going to add more exposure just to brighten up the image, and also I think I would like to draw more attention to this part of the image here, because we've got this building which kind of draws your eyes naturally in, So if we kind of darken the outside of the image by using something like a vignette and then lighten the middle part, this will draw people into the image more, into this section, and it will really have more depth and it will add just more into the image itself. Okay, so now just by doing that, which took me about a minute, I kind of have a plan of what I want to do with this image, so I can take it from that kind of ordinary, dull, uninspiring image into something that's going to look more professional and it's going to stand out more. Okay, so let's get started. You want to make sure you're in the develop module in Lightroom. That's where all the cool stuff happens. That's where you can kind of change the colours, the brightness and everything else. So make sure you click on develop, and then when you've done that you want to click on basic. Let's just click that up. You can see these options here. Just make sure you click on basic, and then it's going to give you this little selection of tools here that you can make some changes to the image with. The first thing I'm going to do is lighten up the shadow area in the image here because it's too dark and I can't see any detail. So I'm just going to grab the shadows here and then push this up, and you can very quickly see how we're adding more light into the shadows, which is bringing about that detail. I'm going to do the same with the blacks because there's blacks here as well. So I'm just going to push that up, and that's bringing some light back in there as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, at the moment the image now is looking a little bit flatter, and that's because we have got less contrast between the colours in the image. So I'm going to add a bit of contrast in. This is going to darken it a little bit again because it's going to darken your dark areas and lighten the light areas, but that's no problem because we've still got a bit of room just to push up the shadows and also the blacks as well. Okay, so this part of the image is looking significantly better and it really stands out a lot more. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push up the exposure of the image. That's just to brighten the image a little bit more. Still a little bit dark I think, so let's just push up the exposure to around about 24, and that's brightened up the image. So we've got more detail in the shadows and the blacks. The image is brighter, so that's looking great. But I've noticed now that this area here, which is obviously the sky, is a little bit flat. You can't see much detail in it. So let's grab our highlights, because the sky is mainly made up of whites and highlights, and let's just drag them down like that, just to bring in a little bit more detail. You can now see a little bit more detail in the clouds, especially in this area here. I'm now going to push up the contrast again a little bit more, just to add a bit more contrast between the colours, and then once again just lighten up the image a little bit more as well. About there's good. So the image now is really starting to take shape. It's kind of looking a lot better than it was when we first started. I'm going to have a look at the before and after in a minute so you can see the difference that we've made. But I think I'm going to take it a few more steps and then we'll have a look at the before and after then. So we've made some changes to the brightness, the exposure and the shadows and the blacks. Now I want to make this image look a little bit more gritty, and a great way of doing that is by pumping up the clarity. The clarity can be found here, so I'm just going to pump this up a little bit, and you should be able to see how that's adding more detail into the trees and the buildings so that they stand out more. One of the things that I discussed right at the start was adding more colour into the photo, because you've got some beautiful blues and yellows, and it'd be great to draw that and make the image pop a little bit more by adding in more colour. How do we do that? You add in the vibrance, which can be found here. So I'm just going to push that up and add in more vibrance to the colours. Now the image is really starting to stand out a lot more now. I'm really happy with the way this is going. So I think we've made enough changes at the moment in the basic tab. So let's just click that off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to something called split toning. What this enables you to do is basically to add colours into the highlights of the image, the lighter areas, and also to do the same with the shadows. So I want to add into this image some more kind of yellowy orange, which is known to give warmth to an image. So all we need to do is make sure that we're on the highlights area here. I'm going to push the U up to like an orange colour. You can see that the colours run through this line, and then I'm simply going to push up the saturation just to add in more saturation of that colour. Now we want to do the same with the shadows. So we've changed the colour in the highlights here. So with the shadows, I can already see this nice bluish colour running through the sky here. So I think it would be nice to complement that in the picture by adding that colour into the shadows. So let's come onto our U, make sure you're under the shadows area here, and then just push up the colour to like a blue, like a light blue, around about there. It's about 184. And then let's push up the saturation. And you can see now that just by pushing up the saturation to about 19, we've really added that lovely blue effect into the shadows, and it's almost given us a cinematic feel. So I really like what we've done with that there. Okay, let's click split toning off. Now you can see that we've made a lot of changes to the image. We've brought back all the detail, we've really brightened up the image, and we've added more vibrance and also more colour into the highlights and the shadows. I think what we should do now probably is draw some attention into the middle of this image here. We can do that by adding something called a vignette. Now all we need to do is come over to Effects, click this down, and then you can see it says here Post Crop Vignetting. We've got an amount slider here, so if you push the amount slider up, it's going to be adding a whitish colour to the border. We don't want that because we want to draw more attention into the middle. So it makes sense to pull it down, which is going to darken the edges like that, and it's going to draw your eye more into the middle of the image here, which is the building. Now you can also mess around with the midpoint, which is just going to change how far the vignette comes in the middle. The roundness, also the feathering. So if I drag the feather all the way down, you've got no feathering at all, which just creates this horrible line. And then obviously if you push the feathering up, it kind of just blends in to the edge a lot more. So I'm just going to leave it about there, and that's looking great. So the final thing I'm going to do with this image quickly is I'm just going to brighten it up a little bit more now we've added this vignette, so it's not so dark around the edge. So I'm just going to click Effects off, come back up to Basic, and then just grab the exposure and push that up slightly. And there we go. So we've changed this image, okay? We've transformed it, should I say. We've kind of took it from a dull, uninspiring look that it originally had, and it's something that most people probably would have deleted the image right from the start, or they would have just left it on their computer and probably never revisited it to kind of make any changes to it. Now we've really made a difference to this image, and it's important for you to see the change that we've made. So let's have a look at the before and then the after. And all we need to do is press the the backslash on your keyboard, and this is going to show you the before. So just hit that on your keyboard now. This is the before image. We've made such a difference to this now. So let's just have a look at the after. This is the image now. And I'm really happy with the way this image has turned out. It's something that I would happily put on my computer or even share on a social media site, saying I've been to this city and I had a great time, look at these buildings. And then if you just look at the previous image, you never would have thought about doing that. So it just shows you how great Lightroom can be for really transforming dull, uninspiring looking images and then making them really look amazing. So that was today's tutorial. I hope you found it helpful. My whole point of today's tutorial was to really get across to people that sometimes, you know, you can take a photo in camera and it doesn't work out exactly how you wanted it to. It could be because you're in a rush, you haven't got much time, so you don't set your camera up correctly to get them proper settings, to get them beautiful photos. And now you've got Lightroom, which can be a backup. So rather than just hitting the delete button straight away and getting rid of it, you can now take it into Lightroom, and if you can really bring them details back in the shadows and the highlights, then you've got an image which you can work with, and potentially you can make that image look really amazing. So I hope you've enjoyed today's tutorial, guys, and if you have, hit that like button on Facebook, and also I'd love to hear from everyone and how they found this tutorial today, if they found it helpful, and if you did, then I'd love to see a comment on there so I can reply back to you, because it's nice to have a conversation with like-minded people about things that we all enjoy. Now, whatever you do today, guys, as always, I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you all really soon.